Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for being with us. Well, this time of year, nature is starting to wake up, including our local wildlife. That means you can expect to see more animals roaming around, including some of our more dangerous wild neighbors. Chris Healy with the Nevada Department of Wildlife is here to talk about that with us. Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, no problem.
All righty. I'm sure this is a very, very busy time of year for all you guys. What is the biggest thing you're dealing with this time of year?
Well, this time of year, all the animals are awaking, and that means in the morning you're going to hear it's very loud in the spring. You hear birds chirping and all that stuff. But the question that everybody asks is, when are the bears waking up? And surprisingly, we haven't had that busy of a winter, even though we had a lot of snow, did not have a lot of snow.
Right.
The bears will be awake at any moment. It'll be the young male bears that will wake up first in the areas around Lake Tahoe and maybe the west side of Carson City. And if people aren't protecting their garbage properly, those bears will become a potential problem.
Because they wake up hungry.
They wake up hungry. They've been sleeping for 3 or 4 months.
Right.
And so the young bears wake up first, and the females with the cubs actually wake up late in March, early in April, depending on the year.
Okay, so obviously with the drought, a continuing problem, they're going to have to try harder and harder to find food sources, right?
It's going to be very difficult for these bears. Last year, we knew we were in the 3rd year of a drought. Now we're entering year number 4 of the drought. That means natural foods, those nuts and the berries and the grasses that they're looking for, will not be there in the abundance that those bears will need.
Right.
So instead of waiting until late July or early August, when we normally start seeing conflict bears coming down into the Truckee Meadows and then the west side of Carson City and down into Gardnerville and Minden, we'll start seeing them in June. And when they show up, they're going to be very hungry, and there's not going to be a lot of food for them. And the one thing that we have to do is make sure we keep garbage away from them, because
Right.
when they go after garbage and they become used to human sources of food, when a bear starts breaking into a home or into a car, it becomes a dangerous bear. And that's where the controversy starts, because sometimes those dangerous bears have to be euthanized.
Exactly. Okay, I want to go through the process of how we get from a naturally existing bear with no problems to problem bear that has to be euthanized, because I know it's a fairly long process. It's not from 1 to 10 right away.
Exactly. Now, historically, it was a drought like this back in the late 80s and early 90s, which turned our wildland bears into the garbage or conflict bears that we talk about now. Those bears, they search for food. They want to be wild. But when there's no other source of food, they're going to look to humans for that. Back in the early 90s, we saw bears develop into garbage bears, where multi-generations over the span of 10, 12, 15 years started, the females became garbage bears. They taught their young how to be garbage bears, and so the cycle continues. And it's been a long tug of war trying to get people to manage their garbage properly so we can try to drive these bears back up into the wild country.
Right.
Mother Nature's throwing a curveball at us because we have this horrible drought that we're living through, and there's no guarantee as to when it will end. And that's why these bears have roamed far and wide, coming in like the west side of Reno, searching for apples and searching for other fruit on trees.
Right.
And so from July all the way into October and even November, it becomes a very active place, and people need to be on their toes, because everybody wants to keep the bears alive and wild and not have to deal with them in a dangerous or conflict situation.
All right, and it's a 3 strikes?
Well, it's if a bear becomes dangerous right away, he doesn't get a 2nd or 3rd strike. Fortunately for us, since 1997, we've handled 1,100 bears. And that's a lot of bears. And we have only had to kill, for public safety reasons, 104 of those. So less than 10%. The much bigger threat to bears are cars. We've had almost 200 bears hit and killed by cars since 1997, when the modern records on bears were, we started keeping those.
Right. Now, you guys, you'll periodically trap bears and relocate them, put them in places a little further away from civilization. I know it's kind of raised a little bit of controversy, especially with people who, want them left in the wild. Can you tell me why you guys do the trapping?
Well, here's what we do is we try to remove the bear from a conflict situation where it will graduate its behavior to being dangerous. And then at that point, because the Department of Wildlife is the agency that has responsibility and potential liability, we're the ones who have to, are the only ones in this equation who have that magic pair there, the liability and the responsibility. So we want to stop the bear's behavior as quickly as we can. We trap it, we use Karelian bear dogs, we will release it, what we call an on-site release. But since the bears, through our research, have told us that they use the whole mountain range, all of the Sierra Nevada for the most part, we're pretty liberal in being able to capture a bear in Verdi and possibly put it up in the backcountry above Tahoe. Because of the satellite collars we've had on bears, it tells us that they use that whole mountain range.
Right.
So we're able to do our best to keep these bears alive and wild. Actually, the biggest problem we've had has been misinformed people who think that we kill every bear that we touch, when in fact we do not, have actually interfered with us, and they stop us from trapping. Some people have actually fed bears. And then when people call the experts at the Department of Wildlife for help, people have been threatened to the point of death threats and such things. So it's been a bad situation, and we're hoping that because of some successful law enforcement actions, stopping people from feeding and tampering traps, and some private litigation that's going on, that maybe some cooler heads are going to prevail, and people can all get on the same page and not allow bears access to garbage. Don't feed them deliberately, and let's do our best to chase them back up into the backcountry and let the experts handle it.
Okay, and if people do see a bear in their neighborhoods, call you guys?
Well, it depends on, if it depends on your neighborhood. If you're lucky enough to live in an urban interface area where the country and the city come together, you may just enjoy seeing the bear. In this case, this year, we're going to see a lot of bears coming down into the into the Reno area. And yes, call the Department of Wildlife. You can go on our website. We can tell you how to live with bears. We can also tell you how to call the experts so we can go out and help you. So yes, the Department of Wildlife, we always like to tell people, we're the experts. We got into this business because we love wildlife and want to do our best to keep it alive and wild.
Great. Okay, I want to switch gears real quick and talk about coyotes.
Coyotes.
Do you guys get coyote calls?
Oh, we get all kinds of coyote calls, and get ready this year because of the drought. We'll get a lot more coyote calls in our urban interface areas.
And coyotes are dangerous. I mean, they can kill small animals. They can kill your pets, your dogs, your cats. What do you advise people to do if they see a coyote on their property?
Well, here's the thing. When people on the edges of the city, for instance, I got a call, tell a quick story. Got a call from Spanish Springs. They said, I don't remember all these coyotes out here. Well, actually, the truth is coyotes have always been out there. It's the humans who just moved into that area in the last 20 years or so that have developed it from ranch land into homes. So now you have these homes and you've actually created attractants for coyotes in the form of small pets, small livestock like goats. So if you don't want coyotes in your area and you don't want them on your land, you're going to have to do your best to prevent the attractant from being there for them. So if you have a small pet, you're going to have to walk that pet out there. You can't just throw them in the backyard and hope that that pet comes back, because we have many, many instances every year of small, what we would call an ornamental dog, a smaller pet dog, a lap dog, being killed and eaten by coyotes. Well, if you want to avoid that, which would be just a horrible and traumatic thing for anybody to have to go through, you're going to have to take on that added responsibility, because guess what? You're living on the edge of the wildlands, and with the drought the way it is, and the only green up and the only water available is actually in these areas where the coyotes are having to come down out of the hills and search. Right. So you're going to have to be extra careful, and this year could be worse than the previous 3 years because of the ongoing and lingering drought.
Now, real quick, is it legal for people to shoot coyotes on their property?
Well, it depends. And now don't forget where your property is. If you're in the midst of an area that is a congested area, you don't want to be discharging a firearm, because one of the first rules of discharging a firearm is knowing what's behind your target. What if you miss that target and the bullet goes through a house and hurts somebody? So that's the thing that you have to be aware of. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, that's one thing. If you're in a congested area, that's another. Then you run afoul of the firearms laws. So you need to do your best to try to keep the coyotes from coming onto your place. But you also need to know that coyotes are extremely well adapted to human activity. And in some cases, we've actually had coyotes come into people's homes or into their backyards and enter through pet doors.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So you need to be extremely aware. And people want to live with coyotes. They don't want to be killing a bunch of coyotes. But because they're aggressive and can see, people's pets and livestock as a source of food, then we get into the part about protecting those interests.
Right.
And so coyotes sometimes fall on the wrong side of that equation.
Now, we just have a few minutes left, but I wanted to touch on the coyote hunts that are occasionally organized. Does the Nevada Department of Wildlife have any position on those organized coyote hunts?
Well, there's a quick little history lesson here. Back when the
Very quickly, because we are running out of time.
Department of Wildlife was organized in the late 40s. When one of the original laws said that coyotes are an unprotected species. So we have, they're not managed as a huntable species. There are lots of them. You don't need a hunting license to go out and kill them. Mm-hmm. Now, people see, if you're having this conversation in the city of Reno, a lot of people saying, oh, poor coyotes. You're having this conversation out in Winnemucca or Elko or Battle Mountain. It's like, hey, wait a minute here, we live with these coyotes. So there's a real cultural tug-of-war going on here between the city folks who are bringing petitions to the Wildlife Commission to say, hey, let's ban this activity, and with the people out in the rurals who know that, hey, wait a minute here, coyotes can do some damage once in a while. And that's why when the Wildlife Commission meets on the weekend of the 20th and 21st, there's going to be a petition in front of them asking to stop these coyote hunts that have taken place, which have taken place for many decades now. It's that 9-member Wildlife Commission appointed by the governor who will have to understand what authority they have to regulate, if any, and have that discussion. The commission could say, yes, we're going to try to stop these. No, we're not going to try to stop them. Or they could say, hey, we need to study this issue further. And that's up to them to set that kind of policy. So the Department of Wildlife is anxious as anybody to wait and see what they come up with.
Okay, just about 30 seconds left. Do you have any other advice just in general for coexisting with our wild friends?
Well, if you don't want wildlife, don't attract it. So when you feed birds, sometimes you're attracting other birds that might eat that bird. So understand, nature's a difficult place in a lot of ways. So, and assume your part in it and try to have as soft a footprint as possible.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. I do
Thank you.
appreciate your time. That is it for this episode of Face the State. But for more information on all of this or to see past episodes, just head to KTVN.com. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week.